Well, the purpose of software engineering has always been, using digital tools to help solve problems for people, like whether
Yeah.
that's like curing cancer or like selling more widgets or like making sure that data is easily accessible and beautifully visualized, like all of these things. The thing that we were supposed to fall in love with was the problem, not like whatever toolkit was getting us to solving the problem.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guest is Paige Bailey, Developer Relations Lead at Google DeepMind, and before that, Principal Product Manager at GitHub, where she launched Copilot and several other AI products. With Paige, we went through a quick demo of how to build and deploy a fully functioning application just with your voice, one that includes accessing your camera, manipulating pictures, and having AI doing a live interview with you to fill out your profile. So this is a bit different episode than usual, so I encourage you to check out the full video, where Paige shares her screen and goes through all the steps. And we also talked about what's coming about AI, how engineers should think about their work, and how the Google DeepMind team is changing with all roles basically converging to one. So let's dive right into the action. Welcome, Paige, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited to show a little bit of what we've been working on at DeepMind over the course of the last about 9 to 12 months.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, Paige, you lead the AI developer relations at Google DeepMind. And before that, you've also been principal product manager at GitHub. You've been involved in launching Copilot and several other products. So you have a unique vantage point on the evolution of AI coding tools and using AI in software. And we have come a long way since Copilot, the first model. So having seen all of this, to set the stage for this conversation, I will just ask, let's say you are an engineer who is walking fresh into this new world. They've been hiding in a cave for the last 4 years somehow. So how would you describe this new reality to them? I mean, what's changed about their job?
Yeah, I've never been more excited to be a software engineer. I think that AI has finally democratized the ability to build in a way that we haven't seen before. And all of the friction that you might have had between having an idea and actually getting it out into the world is kind of going down to zero. Like I'm old enough to remember the days when hackathons were kind of like multi-day weekend experiences where everybody was like sleeping in a gym and eating pizza.
Yeah.
And like if you had a demo at the end of 48 hours, you considered yourself to be very, very lucky. And it was usually just like a very janky HTML only demo.
Yeah.
Now, like it is not unreasonable to assume that you could build a business that's profitable in less than 48 hours over the span of a weekend with like authentication, database support, all of the rest. So I
Yeah.
think for people who enjoy building, there's never been a better time to build.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people need to hear this kind of excitement and this kind of perspective, because there are others instead who are worried about their work. They feel some kind of even grief when it comes, to the actual act of coding. So you're saying there's never been a better time to be a software engineer.
Yeah. And this is also from a person who really loves puzzles, really loves logic games, and who
Yeah.
also really loves like the feeling of being locked into an IDE. Like I think all of the component parts that I strongly disliked about programming. So like trying to remember syntax when swapping between different libraries or frameworks, trying to debug Python environments, like all of those things have gone
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's kind of standing in the way of trying to get the right thing into users' hands is
Yeah.
just how much I'm willing to kick the tires and explain what I need to the model and to provide it with the context that it needs in order to do its job.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I don't think anybody likes to having to remember syntaxes and domain-specific languages and stuff like that.
Yep.
So now there is a lot of diversity and an explosion of different tools and models to do all kind of things. And so it feels like there are a lot of trade-offs that people need to navigate to figure out what's the best way to create a piece of software, right? So when you look at different models, they have different speed, cost, accuracy, and then you look at tools, and there's anything from auto-completion, AI-powered IDEs, CLI tools. So what's your mental model to navigate all of this? Do you have like a simple go-to way to do things, or it depends on the task, depends on what you want to do?
Yeah. I think for me personally, it depends on the task. So as an example, if I'm prototyping like a first instance of an application, I'm probably going to use something like AI Studio,
Mm-hmm.
which is very similar to v0.dev or Lovable for folks on the
Yeah.
call who haven't experimented with it just yet. I'm actually happy to do a demo if that's something that would be interesting. Share my screen so that folks can see. Hopefully, you can see. This is my personal Chrome instance. So,
Yeah.
like, if you see anything that looks amiss, like, don't hold it against me. It's also pink because pink is the best color. But AI Studio Build is kind of intended to be a place where you can rapidly prototype building applications that are supported by the Gemini APIs, as well as many other kinds of APIs. It allows you to swap between Gemini 3 Flash Preview and Gemini 3 Pro to sort
Yeah.
of build the applications themselves. And you can also select between React and TypeScript or
Mm-hmm.
React and Angular. But right now the sort of environment is limited to TypeScript.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but uh, but it's pretty straightforward. And I try to describe things that are complex enough with the motivation that I want to break it.
Mm.
So I'm going to try to build an app and have Gemini fix itself. So let's see how far we can get.
Oh,
But
let's go.
Yep. So let me like I had clicked the microphone, so let's try again. Um, Create an app that takes a picture of the user with the webcam. The app should then use Nano Banana to remove the background from the image of the user and display it in the app. The app should look like Hacker News Y Combinator, but should have kind of a form with a whole bunch of questions about the person to fill out for like a Hacker News profile. So things like name, occupation, where you work, personal website, if you've got a personal website. And then it should use Gemini Live to have a conversation with the user. And as it has a conversation with the user, it should fill out all of the information in the form on the website. And then after it fills out the form, it should use Nano Banana again on the image of the user and show them wearing like a Y Combinator t-shirt. So that's quite a lot of stuff. And so
That's quite
I'm
a lot.
expecting.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yep. And so let's see. It takes a picture of the user, Nano Banana, Hacker News by Combinator, name, occupation, personal website, Gemini Live, fill out the Y Combinator t-shirt. Cool. So let's click build. What's happening behind the scenes, and I'll zoom out a little bit so it might be easier to see, is that we
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of thinking component where Gemini's kind of thinking through all of the things that it would need to do in order to build this application. You can see the code getting written out and then put into this really nice directory structure. You can add files. So you can upload files, things like PDFs or text documents or images or whatever you would like, connect to Drive, take pictures with your webcam, whatever it might be. And then you can also save to GitHub here off to the right.
Hmm.
Part of the reason why this is so fast is because it's using Gemini 3 Flash. So
Hmm.
Gemini 3 Flash is super speedy, and it looks like we've got our first iteration. Let's see how well it did. So camera access, let's capture a picture. We'll see how well it does. Yep, so it removed the
Wow.
background, and then we can start the interview. So, hey there.
Hey, it's great to meet you. Let's get your Hacker News profile looking awesome. First things first, what's your name?
Paige Bailey,
Awesome, Paige Bailey. Now, where are you currently located?
San Francisco, California. You can barely see it. Yep. Yep.
Wow.
San Francisco is where I'm located. Yep.
Got it. The heart of the tech world. What's your current occupation?
I'm a software engineer.
Software engineer. Nice. Who are you with right now, or is it a startup?
Google DeepMind.
Wow, Google DeepMind. That's impressive. Do you have a personal website or portfolio you'd like to share?
Just deepmind.com.
Perfect. Now, could you give me a short bio to summarize your experience?
Best not get involved.
No problem. How about something brief about your journey and goals for the startup world?
All right. Software engineer who really cares about developer experience. And that would be the bio.
Sounds good. So, software engineer who really cares about developer experience. Perfect. One last thing. What's your favorite tech stack?
TypeScript.
Awesome. We have all 7 pieces of information. Your profile is complete. You are ready to become a founder.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love
and
that.
let's see how well it does let's see how well it does. So it's got the Y Combinator t-shirt. It's just you can barely see it. It's the little Y
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
And you're now a YC founder. I probably should have checked with branding just to see if that would be okay, but it's got the little Y down at the bottom. And then if I wanted to deploy it, all you have to do is click deploy app. It kind of pops you over to the deploy app on Google Cloud interface. Gives you a unique URL because clearly everybody in the world wants to create their own like Hacker News profile in this manner.
Obviously.
Um, yep. So it's like deployed the website. I'll go ahead and add the link in the chat as well, so you have access to it. Um, and then, like, you can also see the logs associated with the deployment. So behind the scenes, this created this Cloud Run service. It
Mm,
hid the API key. It set up logs, so things like storage. And then you can
mm.
also connect it to a repo for folks on your team. You can test it. You can deploy new versions, and then you can also monitor the utilization and the billing over time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So all of this, done in like a matter of minutes. It's incorporating Nano Banana, but also the Gemini Live API with function calling to kind of fill out the component parts of the platform. Like I'm not sure if you can see, but it
Yeah,
was
I do.
able to kind of do some of that work. And it also like does look a lot like Hacker News
It
for
does.
the design of the website.
Yeah.
So this is like it's super fast, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to do these kinds of tasks.
Yeah, in fact, I have
And
so
yep,
questions about this, and the first one is
yep,
about picking the right model, right? Because this
yep,
was so fast, and you said that's
yep,
because it uses the Flash model, and I think
yep.
many of us think we always have to use the latest and greatest, like the one with the
Mhm,
most thinking. One is that there is a real trade-off, right? Like
mhm.
with latency, with cost versus accuracy. I mean, how do you decide what's the right model to do the job?
Yeah, I think it's a matter also of just playing with the models, so testing
Yeah.
them out on a couple of examples that you might share. So as an example, our Gemini 3 Flash models are performing about as well as Gemini 3 Pro across most benchmarks. So most of the benchmarks
Hmm.
that we have for the models show Gemini 3 Flash and Pro neck and neck, despite having such dramatically different cost structures. So as
Hmm.
an example, if I select, I'm going to go ahead and we have a comparison mode. So I'm going to select Gemini 3 Flash. I'm going to go into compare mode. I'm going to make sure that for tools, I turn on code execution for both of the models, and then select Gemini 3 Pro. And then also I'm going to turn the default thinking level for Gemini 3 Flash Preview to minimal. So we've got code execution turned on for both. Let me just double check and make sure. So code execution, and then I'm going to say something to the effect of like, draw a cute heart on the coordinate plane with Python, and then hit run. And you can see that Flash did that pretty quickly. So it wrote the code,
Yes.
it output the result. Gemini 3 Pro Preview is still thinking. So
Yeah.
it's, kind of deciding what it should do and how it should approach the problem. It decided on matplotlib, and then it created more or less the
Yeah.
same heart. Just when you hover over the costs, you can see that it ended up being like half a penny for Gemini 3 Pro Preview versus like the tiniest little fraction you can imagine of a penny for
Yeah.
Gemini 3 Flash, despite being blazingly faster and giving you more or less the same result.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the building intuition about, this task is relatively well defined. So I can use a smaller model, especially if I'm incorporating tool calls, versus, this task is a little bit underspecified. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what the answer should be. I need a lot more reasoning. I need kind of somebody who's willing to like go and think about it for a while before
Yeah.
giving me back a result.
Yeah.
That might be more of a Gemini 3 Pro Preview
Yeah.
task.
I think another I love the way you put it, like building an intuition around this. I think another aspect where people need to build an intuition about is how to give instructions and let's say specs about things that need to be built, right? So you've just created an app by just giving a high level spec with your voice even, right? Which goes sometimes against our own intuition that we need to do detailed spec driven development, or we need to tell models exactly what we need to do because that's the way we get the best results. So again, how do you navigate this? I got it that it depends on the task, but how do you navigate this when it comes to things that you believe models need to know from you versus what are the things that they can reasonably figure out by themselves?
Yeah, and I think it also depends on platform. So as an example, AI Studio does some prompt rewriting behind the scenes. So after I give the initial prompt, it does some prompt rewriting to make sure that the model has a very detailed view of what it would need to do to kind of accomplish the task that I've just described. Most IDEs do the same thing. So tools like Cursor or Antigravity, they also have a lot of additional information to kind of hydrate the prompt that you initially share
Yeah.
to give you the best result. ChatGPT, the Gemini app, they also do a little bit of prompt rewriting to make that happen, but not all tools do. And so again, I think it's kind of an experimentation process of like figuring out what the initial response looks like, and then whether or not you might need to help the platform or the system a little bit more than otherwise. I also really love using Gemini to write prompts to give to Gemini. So I'll have the conversation with it. I'll say, create a very detailed prompt that I could give to a large language model in order to do the thing that I just described. And then Gemini will take that request, write the prompt, and then I just feed it back into the model.
Yeah. So after you create a first version like this, you use the AI Studio, you move to an IDE when you get to the stage where you build new features, you iterate on the application, you move to a different tool, you move maybe to Antigravity or use something from the CLI. What do you do?
Yeah, so excellent question. The Gemini or Google AI Studio, we have some exciting things coming on the roadmap, like database support for additional secrets aside from the Gemini APIs, support for MCP servers, OAuth, like all those kinds of things are coming to AI Studio natively, so you don't have to go to an IDE. But until that time, so everybody like keep your eyes peeled. But until that time, what I do is for these more kind of complex things, I do like using anti-gravity. There's another feature that I really, really love in anti-gravity, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, but the full screen. But what you can do is you can even say something like, go to ai.google.dev, and so maybe like do https ai.google.dev and create a step-by-step tutorial with screenshots for how I would generate an API key for the Gemini APIs, and then hit enter. So this is kind of the chat interface in Antigravity for folks who haven't seen it before. You can select different models. So Antigravity supports all of the Gemini models, as well as things like, Opus 4.5, all
Yeah.
of the sort of GPT models. It will build a plan for the task itself. So it's creating a step-by-step tutorial. It's thinking through the process and generating. Since I have limited like network bandwidth, I'm currently dialing in from a ski lodge in Switzerland. It might be a little bit slower than it would be normally, but you can see that it created a tutorial implementation plans with some proposed steps. It's launching the browser, so I'm going to go ahead and like have my hands held up to my face so you can see that I'm not clicking anything. It's going
I
to
trust
it's
you.
going to
Yeah.
yeah, it's so cool. And since it's logged in as me, it has all of the same permissions that I would have for the browser. I've also specified that I want it to check in with me before it does anything that could be potentially harmful. So if it like injects some JavaScript code, or if it wants to do something that might cost money, it will check in with me before it makes those choices. But the it looks like, so it's using the DOM, it's figuring out how to scroll the mouse. We're going to retry one of the steps and see how it's going. So it's taking the initial landing page screenshot. It's figuring out what to process. And again, like this is dependent on the Wi-Fi connection. So if your network connection breaks,
Yeah, sure.
then the connection with the agent breaks. But I love this. You can use it with any of the Gemini models, including Gemini 3 Pro, Gemini 3 Flash, as well as the Opus 4.5 model. And then after it completes all of the work, you can have it running in the background. It can generate the tutorial for you along the way.
Yeah.
And so, like this kind of stuff, I feel like it is very, very powerful, and it can also make changes across code bases. What it can do is you can ask it to go research the best open source databases to use for a project, and then implement it based on the documentation that it found for those projects.
Yeah.
All sorts of things. So it's effectively like having an intern
Yeah.
that can go and do work on your behalf, and kind of logged in with everything that would need to log in, and the ability to also check back in with you if it's about to do anything that might be potentially harmful.
Yeah.
Um,
This is very interesting to me because there are, of course, so many things that in our day to day can now be delegated or worked together with AI if you're a software engineer. So
yeah.
is this like a skill that there is something that you generally need to learn how to do differently now that you can delegate more things to AI, or it's just a matter of wrapping our heads against the fact that we should most of the time just not jump into doing things by ourselves, but try to have the AI do that. I mean, how do you think through this?
Yeah, I never start like it feels kind of corny to say, but that the don't go alone, take this, or
Mm.
something, the meme,
Yeah.
like having a little Navi in Legend of Zelda. Like um I don't start any project alone anymore. Like
Mm,
I'm always seeking a second opinion from my models, and then also trying to think through what the best path to get started might be.
mm,
And it saved so much time.
yeah,
Like in all honesty, like attempting to start from scratch is it's not a responsible use of
your time. Yeah,
your time as a developer, or the company's time if they're employing you to do a job,
yeah.
if that
So
makes sense.
speaking of
Yeah.
team, it makes totally sense. So speaking of teams and organizations, I think when you go through the latest reports and research, individual usage is like everywhere. 90% plus of engineers are using AI, or every day or every week. But when you try to graduate this adoption to team level workflows and usage. Data is still kind of lackluster, productivity gains are unclear, and it feels like most people are left to their own devices. They just use AI to do what they were doing before. So what are the best teams that you know of getting right about using AI? Thinking of those that are getting the most benefits as a team, not just at individual level.
Yeah, I think the more that you can kind of use AI to kind of give recaps of what other folks have done. So it's kind of synthesizing all of the work that's happening for each individual developer,
Hmm.
but without you needing to go and hunt down all of those items yourself.
Hmm.
I also really love I really love there's a GitHub action that's been implemented across a lot of the open source code bases that Google owns. So this one is one of the Google Cloud Platform
Yeah.
open source code bases. But when somebody makes a PR, so like this one as an example, there's kind of Gemini that gets kicked off to give a summary of the changes. So
Hmm.
here's kind of the highlight reel of the things that are being modified. And then there's a recommendation of things that are perhaps not ready to be merged, as well as, oh, okay, like this first implementation was wrong. Here's how you would modify the code, or a recommended path to modify the code, and then reasons why those things might be useful.
Yeah.
And then if you're a reviewer, you can see that a person kind of incorporated those changes, and it gives
Hmm.
you higher levels of confidence that the change is actually ready to be merged.
Yeah.
So I think that this is super helpful for teams to kind of help people get quickly up to speed, as well
Hmm.
as making sure that the information is served up just in time, as opposed to like a person having to go hunt and do the information foraging all by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. And so I have like a small personal story. So I'm in a WhatsApp group chat with a lot of Italian founders, and there was this discussion a couple of days ago about how people are also experimenting because of AI with changing team composition and engineer scope, making them own more. I mean, are you hiring more of this or more of that? What's become the ratio of PMs versus engineers? What are your engineers doing, and so on? So
Yeah.
based on your like vantage point, what you're seeing is also, are these tools changing like the structure of product development teams and how these teams are changing in terms of
Yeah.
who does what?
I think that we're seeing this in real time at DeepMind. Like all of
Mm,
the roles are kind of converging into more or less just one role, which is a combination of product and design and engineering and kind of developer relations. All just like everybody gets to do all of the work
everything.
required to actually ship a product, and that's super exciting for people who love wearing lots of hats. Like I absolutely adore being able to spend parts of my time engineering, parts of my time doing DevRel, parts of my time thinking about product.
Yeah, I love that. But you still have like roles like product managers and engineers and designers, but they just do more of their own things, but and they
Yeah.
expand, they go cross borders, and or
Yeah.
you have like generalist engineers that go full stack. How does it
I,
work?
I I think right now we're in a place where the job titles haven't caught up yet.
Yeah.
And my expectation is that longer term we'll see smaller teams and like
Mm.
probably everybody will just have, a generic title like member of technical staff or something similar.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's super interesting. And what do you think is next? I mean, this is a broad question, but when things I think start to click and work for single engineers with agents and with AI being reasonably more autonomous and doing more things, it naturally starts. There's a lot of talk about orchestrating agents and how to scale this. How us engineers like to think about scaling stuff all the time. Is this something you're looking at? What do you think is the next stage of taking on work with AI?
So personally, as the cost of writing software goes down to zero from a human perspective, right?
Mm,
Like from a like I think we're already seeing the models getting very, very good
mm,
at sort of writing software themselves and kind of the agents also invoking sub agents without us needing
yeah.
to qualify that work needs to happen. I think what's going to be really important is to find opportunities to have kind of the combination of bits plus atoms. So
Mm,
I'm super super bullish about robotics, about AI as applied to the physical world. Like Periodic Labs, as an example, is using AI and robotics to automate material science research. So
mm,
taking the same kind of AlphaFold style approach to test out different, potentially new materials and whether or not they might be useful for certain tasks. I think that the future is going to be kind of software just getting generated without a human even having to invoke or to give specifications. And then
mm,
the question then is like, what is the differentiation?
mm,
And I think that's all about, things that are in the physical world,
mm,
whether it's real human interpersonal connections or things like robotics, things like the historically boring industries like waste management or
mm.
welding, plumbing, like all of these things. And so I think that the more that we can have software engineers thinking about how to apply software to these domains that have historically been underloved,
Yeah.
the better off the entire world will be.
Yeah. And when you think of how to make AI better for software engineering, what do you think is the biggest problem that we need to work on right now? Is are we bottlenecked by like intelligence or more about the tooling around models? I don't know how we pass
Yeah.
context and everything that is around models.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is that the model landscape is changing so rapidly that it's really hard for developers who aren't necessarily tied at the hip to Twitter all day,
Yeah.
to know what's possible, and how even if it's not possible today, it's probably possible a month from now. And also just thinking creatively about how they can apply AI to all of the things that they're currently doing and how they can reimagine what they're currently doing, given that AI is kind of the new kid on the block. Like those are the things that I think are the biggest hindrances right now and I never thought I would say that, but like behavioral change management,
Mm,
and like just general awareness of the capabilities of the tools is the hardest thing.
yeah.
But for the people who are investing time in staying up to speed, who are listening to, podcasts, who are testing out things
Yeah.
themselves, the world is bright. It's just a matter of like all of our jobs now should require some aspect of experimentation with AI tools.
Yeah. Yeah. What I find hard personally is that I may spend time again, building an intuition for myself around what I can or can't do with AI, or
Yep.
even, how or to do it best with AI, right? And that intuition gets updated pretty fast.
Yes.
And I also see it in people who maybe have tried some of these tools like 2 months ago, which is not, a long time ago, and they formed an opinion which was perfectly fine about what AI is good and not good at. And now they would have to update that opinion and invest more time. And I find it hard. And part of my work is doing this and doing research and trend this stuff. I can't begin to imagine people who have to instead do something completely different, for their full-time job. And this comes like on top.
Yeah. This process of updating priors, like I think that like historically people, updated priors like every
Yeah.
year and a half, and now it literally is every week, if not every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, have you seen teams creating swim lanes or intentionally spending time and resources to experiment with the team, to keep people up to date, so cutting from the other things that they need to do instead of leaving people to their own devices?
Yeah, we have an internal chat room called Gen AI Cool Demos. So everybody across the company is sharing cool things that they've built using the Gemini models and similar. And I think that helps inspire a lot of experimentation for our colleagues. And then there's also just baked into the role expectation, you must use AI. You must experiment not only with our own tools, but also everybody else's products, to make sure that you stay kind of up to speed, not just on, what Google has available, but also what everybody else has available.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's the best path, and it's the only thing that will make sure that companies are successful long term is just by encouraging this experimentation and play, and making sure that it's baked into role expectations, and that there's also the expectation to share out whatever you've learned with colleagues.
Yeah. And makes me think, you work in developer relations, so you obviously speak with a lot of developers. And I don't know about you, I know many who are not happy about this whole transformation. They feel they're going to miss things from their jobs. They genuinely like writing code, so they think their job is going to become less enjoyable, and they're going to become like orchestrators of AI agents, and that's going to be less fun. At the beginning, you said instead you're more excited than ever. When you speak with some of these people instead, how do you help them navigate this? Is there something about how we think about software engineering that we need to reframe? Something about our identity? What do you think?
Well, the purpose of software engineering has always been, using digital tools to help solve problems for people, like whether
Yeah.
that's like curing cancer, or like selling more widgets, or like making sure that data is easily accessible and beautifully visualized, like all of these things. The thing that we were supposed to fall in love with was the problem, not like whatever toolkit was getting us to solving the problem. And we've all, like I'm old enough to remember when the move from different frameworks. Everybody was initially on an internal machine learning framework at Google called Disbelief, and then it got moved to TensorFlow, and then it got moved to JAX, it's just part of the job of being a software engineer, is like your stack changes.
Yeah.
And so this is just yet another stack change. It's just like a more delightful one, and means that there's less in the way of getting us to the final idea.
Yeah. And
So
the goal is to solve the problems, and writing code manually all the time is like byproduct by that. It's not something that we take for granted, that it's going to stay that way forever. It's not what we get paid for, basically.
yeah. Yeah, and like I don't think any of us would want to write assembly code by hand. And so like the natural progression is that we don't have to we shouldn't have to learn the kind of convoluted syntax for any of these programming languages or frameworks.
Yeah, true. So thank you so much, Paige, and for coming on the show. Thank you again.
For having me. This was super fun.
Absolutely, super fun. Thank you again. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.